August 8, 1942. The sun sinks slowly behind the jagged silhouettes of the Solomon Islands, bleeding red into the sea. The water between Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and a small volcanic island called Savo lies heavy and dark. The Marines ashore are still locked in brutal jungle fighting. Out here, the ships of the Allied fleet form a protective ring around the vulnerable transports unloading men, fuel, ammunition, and food. This stretch of ocean has not yet earned its grim nickname. It is simply a wide expanse of black water, scattered with the shapes of heavy cruisers and destroyers riding at patrol speed. Their guns are manned, their engines hum steadily. Their crews are exhausted. For 2 straight days, the fleet has been on high alert. Since the landings began on August 7th, nerves have remained tight. Japanese aircraft have probed the area. Bombs have fallen. Every radar contact sparks attention. Yet the expected counterblow from the Imperial Japanese Navy has not yet arrived. Some officers believe it may not come at all. Others are certain it will. The Allied screening force is divided into northern and southern groups. Heavy cruisers patrol near Savo Island, covering the approaches. Destroyers operate as pickets farther out. Radar sets, still relatively new technology, sweep the darkness in slow rotations. The equipment is promising but imperfect. Contacts appear and disappear. Sea clutter confuses operators. Fatigue dulls judgment. On the bridges of the cruisers, dim red lights glow softly over charts and instruments. Sailors speak in low voices. Coffee is passed from hand to hand. Some men stare into the darkness for so long that their eyes begin to imagine shapes in the waves. They know the Japanese Navy has a reputation. Night combat is its specialty. Years of training, strict discipline, and powerful long-range torpedoes give it confidence in darkness. The Allies, by contrast, are still learning how to fight effectively without daylight. Far to the northwest, that confidence is moving swiftly across the sea. A Japanese striking force under Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa pushes south from Rabaul. 7 cruisers and a destroyer advance in tight formation. Their silhouettes are barely visible against the horizon. Orders are clear and simple. Strike the Allied fleet guarding Guadalcanal. Inflict maximum damage. Withdraw before daylight air power can respond. The Japanese crews are calm. Many have combat experience from earlier Pacific campaigns. They trust their optics and their torpedoes. The Type 93 long lands, a weapon of extraordinary range and explosive power. The night deepens. Clouds obscure the moon. The ocean turns ink black. Allied picket destroyers patrol their assigned sectors, but gaps remain between formations. Communication across the scattered groups is not seamless. Reports of possible enemy movements earlier in the day were inconclusive. No one wants to sound an unnecessary alarm. Shortly before midnight, the Japanese force slips past one of the outer screens without being clearly identified. Darkness and confusion work in their favor. Engines are kept steady. Signals are minimal. The formation continues inward toward the heart of the Allied perimeter. On Allied ships, the routine of watch continues. Some sailors lean against cold metal rails, scanning empty horizons. Others check ammunition belts or adjust binoculars. The sense of threat feels distant, almost theoretical. Then, just after 1:30 a.m. on August 9th, the sky above the southern cruiser group suddenly bursts into brilliant white light. Japanese float planes have dropped flares. For a heartbeat, the darkness vanishes. The silhouettes of Allied heavy cruisers are starkly illuminated against the Black Sea. Masts, gun turrets, and superstructures stand exposed like targets on a range. Confusion erupts across bridges. Officers shout for identification. Some believe the flares might be friendly. Others realize too late what they signal. Even before alarms fully sound, Japanese torpedoes are already slicing through the water. Long lance torpedoes travel silently beneath the surface, leaving only faint wakes barely visible in the reflected flare light. They are aimed carefully at the clustered Allied cruisers. Ships that moments ago believed themselves to be guarding the perimeter. On board the leading Allied cruiser, lookouts finally spot fast-moving shapes in the water. A warning is shouted. It is too late. The first explosion rips through steel hull plating with catastrophic force. A column of fire and twisted metal shoots skyward. The night erupts into chaos. Japanese cruisers open fire almost simultaneously. Their guns flash in disciplined volleys. Shells crash into superstructures, smashing radar arrays and command stations. Secondary explosions follow as ammunition ignites. Allied ships scramble to respond, but surprise has shattered coordination. Some crews rush to battle stations half-dressed. Others attempt to maneuver in tight waters already filled with torpedo wakes and burning debris. Within minutes, the calm sea has transformed into a battlefield of blinding light and roaring flame. Searchlights stab through the darkness. Gunfire echoes across the sound. Burning oil spreads across the surface, reflecting orange and red against black waves. On board stricken cruisers, sailors fight desperately to contain fires. Damage control teams race through smoke-filled corridors. Orders are shouted through static-filled communication lines, but the ambush is precise and devastating. Japanese gunners shift targets smoothly, exploiting confusion. More torpedoes slam home. Another heavy cruiser shudders violently as explosions tear through engine rooms. Power fails. The ship begins to list. In less than half an hour, the Allied southern group is in ruins. Ships that had stood guard confidently only moments before now burn uncontrollably. Further north, the second Allied cruiser group struggles to understand what is happening. Reports are fragmented. Radar contacts are misinterpreted. By the time clear awareness spreads, Japanese shells are already crashing down upon them as well. The night offers no mercy. Savo Island itself looms silently in the darkness, its volcanic slopes indifferent to the destruction unfolding around it. The water between Guadalcanal and Tulagi is filled with tracer fire and exploding shells. Men leap into the sea to escape flames. Lifeboats are lowered amid falling debris. The smell of burning fuel mixes with salt air and cordite. The ambush has achieved total surprise. What began as a routine night patrol has become one of the worst naval disasters in American history, and it is only the first hour. The sea that seemed calm at sunset is now an inferno. Ironbottom Sound is earning its name. The night is no longer quiet. It is alive with fire. After the first torpedo strike, the Japanese formation does not hesitate. Admiral Mikawa's cruisers maintain speed and discipline, cutting directly into the Allied Southern Patrol Group. Searchlights snap on in unison, brilliant beams locking onto stunned American and Australian ships. The illumination is blinding. Allied crews, still scrambling to full alert, suddenly find themselves exposed in harsh white light. Japanese gunners do not waste the advantage. Shells crash into bridges and gun turrets with brutal precision. The opening minutes are decisive. The heavy cruiser HMAS Canberra is among the first hit. Torpedoes tear into her hull. Shellfire rakes her decks. Power fails almost immediately. Fire spread uncontrollably. Within minutes, she is dead in the water, burning fiercely, unable to respond effectively. Nearby USS Chicago is struck as well. A torpedo explodes against her bow, ripping open steel plates and throwing men from their stations. Confusion spreads across her bridge as smoke fills the compartments. The southern screen has been shattered in less than 10 minutes. But the ambush is not over. Mikawa orders his force northward, driving straight toward the second Allied cruiser group patrolling near Savo Island. His ships maintain formation, guns reloaded, torpedo tubes ready. They have achieved total surprise, and they know it. On the northern side, the American cruisers USS Quincy, USS Vincennes, and USS Astoria are only beginning to grasp the scale of disaster. Reports from the south are garbled. Some officers still believe friendly ships are firing illumination rounds. Others sense something far worse. Then Japanese searchlights pierce the darkness again. The beams settle on USS Quincy. Almost instantly, enemy shells begin landing with terrifying accuracy. The first salvos strike a superstructure, killing or wounding key officers before they can fully organize a defense. Torpedoes follow. A massive explosion rocks Quincy's hull. Another torpedo hits moments later. Fires erupt below deck. Ammunition begins to cook off. The ship attempts to return fire, her guns flashing defiantly into the night, but she is overwhelmed by concentrated Japanese broadsides. Across the water, USS Vincennes is caught in the same storm. Shells rip through her bridge and communication centers. Torpedoes slam into her sides. She lists sharply, flames climbing higher with every passing minute. Damage control teams fight desperately, but the damage is catastrophic. USS Astoria engages as well, her guns firing steadily into the darkness. For a brief moment, it seems the Americans might rally, but Japanese gunnery remains superior in the night. More hits land. Fires rage out of control. The sea between the cruisers is a nightmare of exploding shells and burning debris. Men shout orders through smoke-choked air. Fire hoses snake across tilted decks. The smell of burning paint and fuel thickens with every second. Japanese ships continue their assault with calm efficiency. Their Type 93 long-lance torpedoes proved devastating. Unlike American torpedoes of the time, these run fast and far, powered by compressed oxygen and carrying enormous warheads. When they hit, they do not merely damage, they devastate. Within less than an hour, 4 Allied heavy cruisers are mortally wounded. Quincy rolls heavily to port. Flames engulf her decks as she begins to sink bow first. Survivors scramble into the dark water, some leaping from railings just before the ship slips beneath the surface. Vincennes follows not long after. Her crew fights until the end, but the flooding cannot be contained. She capsizes and disappears into the Black Sea. Astoria burns through the early morning hours. Damage control efforts keep her afloat briefly, but the fires prove unstoppable. By daylight, she too will sink. Canberra remains crippled and aflame, abandoned by much of her crew. She will be scuttled later to prevent capture. The entire engagement has unfolded with terrifying speed. From first contact to withdrawal, the main battle lasts barely 40 minutes. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ends. Admiral Mikawa faces a critical decision. The Allied transport ships, packed with troops and supplies for Guadalcanal, lie largely unprotected farther east. They are vulnerable targets. A continued attack could devastate the invasion entirely. But dawn is approaching. American carrier aircraft could appear with first light. Unsure of the full strength of Allied forces nearby, and wary of air retaliation, Mikawa chooses to withdraw. His cruisers turn north and vanish into the darkness, leaving behind burning wrecks and hundreds of sailors struggling in oil-covered water. The sea grows strangely quiet again. Survivors cling to rafts and debris, calling out to one another in the darkness. Some float for hours before rescue. Others disappear silently beneath the surface. Ironbottom Sound has claimed its first major victims. By the time the sun rises on August 9th, the scale of disaster becomes clear. For heavy cruisers lost, over 1,000 Allied sailors dead or missing. The protective screen around the Guadalcanal landings shattered in a single night. The ambush has been nearly perfect. Shock ripples through the remaining fleet. How had such a powerful Japanese force slipped through undetected? Why were warnings missed? Why had coordination failed at such a critical moment? These questions will echo for years. For now, only the smoke rising from the water provides an answer. The Pacific War has revealed another harsh truth. In the darkness, the Imperial Japanese Navy is deadly, and the Allies have just learned that lesson in fire. The night after the ambush deepens the nightmare. Smoke hangs thick over Ironbottom Sound, drifting like a sinister fog across black waves. Fires from the burning cruisers illuminate faces of men exhausted, terrified, and soaked in oil and seawater. On USS Quincy, chaos reigns. The bow is engulfed in flames. Officers shout orders through smoke and heat, but the bridge is shattered. Damage control teams run through twisted corridors, hoses spraying water, yet the fire spreads faster than it can be contained. Explosions echo through the decks, throwing debris and men alike into the blackened night. USS Vincennes is aflame. Crew members leap overboard to escape the inferno. Some cling to debris, others to life rafts that float among floating bodies. The water itself is treacherous, thick with burning oil, gasoline, and floating wreckage. Every splash and shout is a reminder of how thin the line is between survival and death. Astoria's deck is a hellscape. Men fight desperately to keep her upright. But after torpedoes rip through the hull and shells strike her magazines, survival is impossible. Flames roar across her superstructure. Sailors shout final orders and prayers, some clutching rifles as they prepare to abandon ship. Across the Sound, the Japanese cruisers continue their disciplined withdrawal. They move silently, engines muffled. Torpedoes spent. No pursuit is attempted. The ambush is over. Victory has been achieved without a single ship lost to the enemy. Rescue efforts begin under tense circumstances. Destroyers move through the wreckage, taking on survivors from rafts and debris. Sailors cling to each other, faces coated with soot and salt, eyes hollowed by shock and exhaustion. Survivors recount torpedo strikes, sudden flashes of shells, and the screams of comrades lost in seconds. For those still on deck, the horror is relentless. Fires rage alongside flooding compartments. Black smoke fills air, mixing with seawater spray. The heat burns flesh. The cries of the wounded pierce the night. Every step is uncertain. Every movement may be the last. By dawn, the true extent of the disaster becomes clear. 4 heavy cruisers have been destroyed or fatally damaged. Quincy, Vincennes, Astoria, and Canberra. Over 1,000 Allied sailors have been killed. The protective screen around Guadalcanal is shattered. The Marines ashore, unaware of the full scope of naval losses, continue to fight against entrenched Japanese positions on Tulagi and Guadalcanal. Admiral Mikawa's night ambush is complete. His fleet slips back north, vanishing into the darkness from which it emerged. He has inflicted maximum damage with minimal risk. The sea burns behind him, leaving only charred wreckage, oil-slicked waters, and stunned survivors. Ironbottom Sound earns its grim name tonight. It is no longer just water between islands. It is a tomb, a fiery graveyard for ships and men lost to a single, devastating night. Survivors cling to rafts and floating wreckage, some shouting for comrades who will never respond. The night has been cruel. The morning is grim. The Pacific War, for the first time since the Guadalcanal landings, has delivered a lesson in fire, chaos, and the lethal precision of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ambush at Savo Island is a wake-up call. The darkness favors the experienced, the disciplined, and the ruthless, and the Allied Navy has just been shown how costly underestimating the enemy can be. Every ship, every sailor, every moment of this night will be remembered, not as a victory, but as a warning. The night ambush is complete, but its echoes will haunt every Allied sailor in the Pacific for months to come. The sun rises over Ironbottom Sound on August 9, 1942, revealing the grim toll of the night. Smoke still drifts from burning wrecks, black oil slicks coat the water. Flaming debris floats across the waves. Survivors cling to rafts and pieces of shattered ships, faces streaked with soot and salt, eyes hollow with shock. The scale of the disaster sinks in slowly. 4 heavy cruisers are lost or fatally damaged: USS Quincy, USS Vincennes, USS Astoria, and HMAS Canberra. Over 1,000 sailors are dead, missing, or wounded. Entire divisions of experienced men vanish in minutes. The protective screen over the Guadalcanal landings is shattered, leaving transports exposed and vulnerable. On Guadalcanal, Marines are unaware of the disaster. They continue to fight for Tulagi and the approaches to Henderson Field. Only later do reports reach them of the night ambush, of ships engulfed in fire, of comrades lost in the dark. The shock is immense. Allied command scrambles to understand what happened. Radar failures, miscommunications, and inadequate night tactics are analyzed. Questions abound. Why was the Japanese force undetected? Why did coordination break down? Why were so few survivors rescued immediately? Answers are partial. Lessons are painful. The Imperial Japanese Navy celebrates a stunning tactical victory. Vice Admiral Mikawa withdraws his force efficiently, having achieved near-total surprise and inflicted maximum damage with minimal loss. He has demonstrated the deadly effectiveness of night combat, precise gunnery, and the devastating reach of Type 93 long-lance torpedoes. But the cost of hesitation is evident. Mikawa could have attacked the transports and potentially changed the outcome of the Guadalcanal landings entirely. Dawnloom's aircraft from Henderson Field could intervene, and air superiority is still uncertain. He retreats, leaving the strategic situation unresolved. Back at Ironbottom Sound, the water is littered with wreckage. Survivors are pulled from the oil-slicked waves. Some cling to life rafts, some to floating timber, others drift alone in silence. Medics work tirelessly on makeshift rescue vessels, stabilizing the wounded. The stench of burned fuel, salt water, and human suffering fills the air. The psychological toll on Allied forces is enormous. Confidence in night operations is shaken. Confidence in the ability to secure supply lines to Guadalcanal wavers. The Pacific War feels far larger, darker, and more ruthless than ever before. Yet, in the aftermath, there are glimmers of resolve. Survivors carry stories of heroism. Sailors who manned guns to the last moment, officers coordinating firefighting in collapsing compartments, men who sacrificed themselves to save shipmates. These acts will be remembered even as the sea claims their vessels. The name Ironbottom Sound begins to spread. It is no longer just a body of water. It becomes a symbol of loss, courage, and the brutal reality of naval warfare. Ships will continue to sink here. Sailors will continue to die, but the lessons of August 8 to 9, 1942 will shape every Allied night operation in the Solomons. By mid-morning, salvage teams and reinforcements begin arriving. Bodies are recovered where possible. Ships still afloat are patched and readied for future operations. Guadalcanal remains under Allied control, though tenuous and threatened. The first step in the Pacific counteroffensive has survived, but at a cost that cannot be measured merely in ships or tonnage. Historians will later call the Battle of Savo Island one of the worst Allied naval defeats in history. 4 cruisers lost, more than 1,000 dead, and a night of terror that highlighted vulnerability, confusion, and the lethal precision of the Japanese Navy. But it is also a story of survival, courage, and the beginning of adaptation. From this disaster comes knowledge, experience, and a grim determination. The Allies learned to respect night engagements, to improve radar and coordination, and to prepare for the ruthless tactics of their opponent. Ironbottom Sound, once just a stretch of water between islands, has earned its name in fire, blood, and sacrifice. The waves will remember the ships, the men, and the night that changed the course of the Guadalcanal campaign. The Pacific War is far from over. More battles await, each with its own fire, darkness, and horror. But the survivors of Savo Island endure. They will fight again, carrying memories of the night the sea burned. The night ambush is complete, the lessons seared into Allied minds, and the war continues, ever darker and more uncertain.